Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for episode 485 with Jonathan Levi. Jonathan is talking about how you can become superhuman with your learning. We're talking speed reading and memory hacks. So you'll learn 1, the scientifically proven method for speed reading. 2, how curiosity improves your learning. And 3, a simple trick to remember names and faces. So if you'd like to take a look at the show notes or the transcript or the links to items we've referenced, it's at awesomeatyourjob.com/ep485. And now here's Jonathan's story. Jonathan Levi is a serial entrepreneur, author, and lifehacker born and raised in Silicon Valley. Jonathan is the author of the Become a SuperLearner series and the host of the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast. His passions include learning languages, musical instruments, acro yoga, weightlifting, and cooking. He now lives in Tel Aviv, Israel, with his superwoman, Limmor. Big thanks to Jonathan for spending some time with us, and big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out.
One sponsor to check out is Bamboo HR. I love owning my own business, but I do not love doing government compliancy things. HR is hard, but Bamboo HR is easy. Bamboo HR is a powerful yet flexible all-in-one HR solution for your growing business. Wrangling benefits, onboarding, performance, recruiting, reporting, vacation time, trainings, oh my, can take hours. But with Bamboo HR, it can take mere minutes. Setting up a demo account is ridiculously easy. I didn't have to coordinate calendars to schedule a demo with a sales rep. Nope. I just created a sample account with sample data within 3 minutes of visiting their website, so I could immediately behold its vast capabilities. The software is genuinely beautiful in its breadth and simplicity. No wonder 34,000 companies trust Bamboo HR with their HR needs. So reclaim your time and check out the free demo at bamboohr.com/free demo. See for yourself all that Bamboo HR can do and how truly affordable it can be too. That's bamboohr.com/free demo. One more time, bamboohr.com/free demo.
One sponsor to check out is EarthBreeze. I recently saw a Netflix documentary that talks about all the plastic that we throw away and we try to recycle, but it doesn't really get recycled. So I've been trying to reduce my plastic, and the most wonderful way that I've been doing so has been skipping those gigantic laundry detergent bottles for EarthBreeze detergent sheets. EarthBreeze detergent comes in super convenient cardboard, plastic-free packaging, so it's much more eco-friendly than your normal detergent. And I love how portable and quick and easy they are, and I save a pretty reasonable amount of time skipping having to carefully pour and measure liquid detergent into the machine by just tossing a quick and easy sheet in there. I personally like their scent-free version, so check out EarthBreeze for an easy way to get clean clothes without the plastic waste and get 40% off with your subscription at earthbreeze.com/awesome. That's earthbreeze.com/awesome. Jonathan, thanks for joining us here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Pete. I'm really stoked to be here.
Well, I'm stoked to have you. And boy, we're talking about super learning, speed reading, memory, becoming superhuman type things. I think it's going to be a ton of fun, but I'd love it if you could maybe orient us to, for starters, like, what's really possible for a human being with regard to some of this stuff? I know we got memory champions who dazzle us, but can you just sort of paint a picture for what happens at the highest echelons of human super learning?
Yeah. No one's ever asked me that.
I'll just give you a little softball to warm it up.
Yeah, why has no one ever asked me that? I think the real answer is, I don't know, but I know what I've seen. I don't know what the upper echelon is, but I've seen incredible learners throughout history, and I've made a practice of studying incredible learners throughout history. And the vision that I paint, and the reason my show is called Superhuman Academy, it used to be called Becoming Superhuman, is because I believe in a different model of superhuman. And I think probably the prior generation, what I call superhuman, they would call a Renaissance man or woman. Someone like Benjamin Franklin, or to go less cliche, someone like Thomas Jefferson, who I invented 15 different electronic devices. I discovered electricity. I, on the way, happened to dabble in diplomacy a little bit and help entire countries form their revolutions, made huge advancements in democracy, learned 6 languages because no one was willing to translate the book, so I did it myself, that kind of thing. Built businesses, sold businesses, established entire organizations. And I think you see this throughout history. You see these people who are so multidisciplinary. And I think that ultimately, if you ask me, what's the purpose of all of this? Why learn faster? It is to do that. It's not really to go deep into one subject, though I suppose you could. But I think apropos, like, how do you be awesome at your job? It's being a multidisciplinarian. It's being able to be someone who's maybe in sales and already have learned your entire customer's product pipeline. I mean, I gave a talk to Shell's 150 top salespeople in the world, and I asked them, what's your biggest challenge? And they're like, we need to know more about our customers' businesses than the customer knows themselves. I'm like, that's a pretty big challenge, because, you know, the customer focuses on one business. You each are managing 5 to 10 accounts, but that's what it is. And that's what's possible if you can learn, and more saliently, if you can retain everything you learn, you can be a multidisciplinarian. And from then and there, things get fun. Then you can learn 4 to 5 languages. Then you can learn 4 to 5 different musical instruments. You can pick up different sports and habits like acro yoga or Olympic weightlifting or speaking Russian or piano, or these are all things that I've just done in the last few years, because you make learning a habit, you make learning a super skill, and then you make learning a hobby and a way of life.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So your benefits there in terms of what's possible is is it fair to say that most of us could become half as awesome as Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin if we knew super learning approaches?
Yeah, I think we could become just as awesome.
Oh, 100% is awesome.
100% is awesome.
That's exciting.
And I'm right now reading a book called A Brief History of Everything. And I've read half the biographies out there and the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin and Elon Musk. Like, I really geek out on this stuff. And sometimes I just think to myself, I'm like, you know, it was easier back then because there were fewer people doing cool stuff. It's like when 1% of the population was college educated and the vast majority of people couldn't read, it was pretty easy to stand out as a brilliant genius. So I think we can achieve as much in learning. It might be harder to have an impact. Timing is everything, right?
Yeah, it's like you and everybody else knows 5 languages. Not impressed.
Bingo. And it's like, I once was told by a teacher, it was like the best thing you can ever do to be successful is be born in the right place at the right time to the right parents. Everything else is like minor tweaks. So, you know, being born on the cusp of like a couple different revolutions in a couple different countries in a time where like democracies are forming, that's pretty, like, you've got really great opportunities there that I think maybe we don't have. But then again, maybe 300 years from now, people will go, gosh, I wish that I could have been born right when the world was transitioning from old industrial agriculture and ineffective means of energy production and pollution to renewables and sustainables. Like, gosh, they had so much more opportunity back then than we do now. So who knows, right?
Yeah, indeed. It could go either way. Well, so that's exciting. So we've painted a big picture in terms of what may be possible. And I'd love to maybe zoom right in. So what's really nifty about your courses and helping folks become superhuman and super learning is that, you know, you can readily measure results with regard to, I mean, memory performance, speed reading performance, fast learning performance. So could you share with us just roughly kind of the approximate average before after results that you see for your students in terms of what you do measure?
So I don't have exact numbers for you, but I can tell you from stuff that people publicly post in our Facebook group. Typically, when people come to us, they can remember exactly the average, right? Your short-term memory is kind of like 4 plus or minus 2. Sometimes we get someone who can memorize 7. When people leave our course, the maximum we have them memorizing is like 20 random pieces of information, and they all can memorize the 20. I can tell you that I push myself a little further because I'm kind of the poster boy. And I can memorize 50 digits backwards and forwards without breaking a sweat. And at the upper echelon students that we have that have kind of gone on to take this more seriously, they're memorizing thousands of digits. Or we had one guy go to a conference and memorize 150 people's names at the conference. And the conference was a 2-day conference. It's like, how did you manage to have 150 conversations? That's the super skill there.
Really? When do you get to go to the bathroom?
Exactly.
Where'd you get your snack?
Right. You probably were shaking hands and kissing babies, but it's insane what you can do. And I guess I should preface by saying, like, we teach the exact same techniques that are being taught to win world memory championships. We scale it down a little bit because some of the things that are being done in competition are just not practical. For example, in order to win a world memory championship today, you need to kind of have all the memorization work and setup done. So all you have to do is rearrange things. So I'm not going to tell you, hey, Pete, go out and memorize 999 different images for all the possible different 3-letter or 3-digit numbers out there in the world. But we teach the exact same techniques in terms of how you actually do it, how you create these memories, how you organize them, how you structure them, how you review them. So the world record right now for memorizing a deck of cards is under 13 seconds. The record, last I checked, this changes pretty often. Last I checked, the record for the number of decks of cards was 36 decks of cards in an hour. Pi has been memorized to 30,000+ digits. I mean, it's actually quite ridiculous what your mind can do if you know how to use it. And that's like the really big asterisk, because most of us are never taught how to use our brain.
Oh, that's intriguing. So that's the memory side of things. And how about the speed reading side of things?
Yeah. So speed reading, I always like to preface, not least because people have been fined many hundreds of thousands of dollars for false advertising in speed reading, but also because of those individuals, people have a lot of misconceptions about what speed reading is. So it's not reading a page a second, at least not the way we teach it, which is the way that's based on science. It's not reading one page with your left eye and the other page with your right eye. It's not photo reading. It's not any of that. The research is very clear. And I encourage people to visit our website, superhumanacademy.com/science. We actually hired a PhD in neuroscience who recently was on a Nobel Prize winning team for some of the work that they did in memory. The research is very clear that comprehension drops at 600 words a minute. Coincidentally, the speed reading that we teach, we tell people you can get up to 600 words a minute with the amount of comprehension that you're getting or higher because of the memory techniques that we implement. And you can get up to 800 words per minute with around 70 to 80% comprehension. Again, there's sometimes things that you need to read that you don't really need 100% comprehension. But with all that prefaced, I do want to say, memory techniques are kind of like an operating system overhaul, or to choose a different metaphor, it's like completely changing out the engine and transmission. Whereas speed reading, I found in my experience and the experience of over 200,000 students, is more like a specific tool. And you're not going to use it all the time like you use memory techniques. You're going to use it when you need information quickly, when the joy of reading is not the most important part, and when you're not going to be doing it for extended periods of time. And people always ask me, okay, you can read 700-800 words a minute. That means that you can read the average book in 90 minutes. And I say, yep. And they say, do you ever do that? And I say, only once or twice, because after that, I need like a 3-hour nap. It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. So I always like to give people those caveats because it's an incredibly powerful tool. It got me through business school. It is the only reason why my email inbox is not completely overflowing and why I am able to keep up on a lot of the research. I would hate to say all the research that's being done on neuroscience and learning, but it's not what a lot of people have marketed it as.
You know, it's so funny, Jonathan. I was debating with myself. It was like, all right, if this guy comes on the show and it's like, you can do 10,000 words per minute.
Yeah.
How much am I going to rip into him? Am I going to do it gently or viciously? You know, that's what I was thinking.
Viciously.
It was like, okay, well, I just quietly cut that out because I know it's wrong. But I love you gave me all the right answers. Not that I know all the right answers in advance, but I've dabbled and researched a bit in terms of like what's just impossible. And I love the integrity here in terms of, you know, hiring the doctor, getting into the mix and sharing the constraints and limitations. Like, hey, well, first of all, it would still be awesome to double your reading whenever you need to. I mean, that's still a huge benefit. But note, if you want to really enjoy what you're reading, or you do want to savor it, and you want to be at full energy for everything else you're doing in the rest of the day, and then it ain't the tool for you to pull out in that moment. So great contextualization.
And I do want to say that there are gradations, right? Like after being trained in speed reading before, well, there kind of isn't a before. I had learning disabilities growing up. So my parents bought me speed reading books when I was like 12. So it's hard to determine when my before was, but I never could get it to work. And when I was tested at age 24, for my reading speed, I was reading at like 450 words per minute, whereas the average person reads 200 to 250 words per minute if they're college educated. But my comprehension was 40%. So like, what does that achieve? Today, I can read that same 450 words per minute with near perfect comprehension. So it's not an either or situation, but it is. One of my mentors once told me the best speed readers are able to vary their speed, not just based on what they're reading, but in individual sections and sentences. So it's like, okay, I know what's going to happen in this section. Let me ratchet it up and I can read much faster. Whereas, okay, hang on, I'm really confused about this whole chapter on quantum mechanics. I'm going to bring it back down. And that back down may still be 300, 400, 500 words per minute, but with much higher comprehension. And when I created our original course, I came at it from this whole perspective of, first off, I was taught to speed read by two different teachers. And it never worked for me because it's the classic Woody Harrelson, like I read War and Peace in an hour and it's about Russia. But also understanding that like the ultimate time waster is chewing air and reading. It's even worse to read fast and forget everything you're reading than it is to just read it slowly. So we focused on comprehension and truthfully speaking, over the last 6 years, we've made the comprehension and memory and retention parts bigger and the speed reading parts smaller. And we've moved all the comprehension and retention pieces up earlier on in the course because it just time and time again, that's what transforms people's lives in our courses.
Well, so let's dig into a bit of the how here. So how does one boost their comprehension when they're reading?
Yeah, that's a great question. First thing you can do, and I think your listeners will appreciate this because I haven't talked about this in 5,000 other interviews that I've done over the last 6 years. Many people don't realize how important preparation is overall. And I'm going to explain two different aspects of preparation. One, and both of them are going to seem like there's no way that works. This is fluff. Give me the good stuff. This is the good stuff. Don't worry. One, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And so if you just pick up a book and you don't stop to ask yourself, what am I trying to get out of this book? What level of comprehension? Am I reading it for a specific piece of information, for enjoyment? That's going to change the way that you pay attention. It's going to change. It's kind of like setting goals, right? Like if you don't have goals, you kind of just coast. Like, what are you doing, right? So going in with preparation, and preparation also means like having a backup plan. Like, what are you going to do if you don't understand the text? Are you going to reread it, or are you going to ask someone? Or are you going to look it up somewhere else online and see if it's explained more clearly? So having this backup plan and knowing exactly what you want to get out of the text. And I go in my next book, The Only Skill That Matters, I go into much more depth about this conversation of preparation and give people kind of a flight checklist of you need to answer these questions before you dive into learning. Part of the reason that this works so well is we know a lot about the way that the adult brain learns and the requirements for learning. And we know that adults learn best if they know why they're learning something, how they're going to use it, and if they're going to use it immediately, which is a nice segue into the next kind of preparation piece, which is something we call pre-reading. Pre-reading comes from this reading methodology called SQ3R, survey, question, read, recall, review. When you do pre-reading, you survey and question. You're looking at the text very, very quickly and kind of skimming. You're doing what I like to call reinforced skimming. You are looking for things that jump out at you, titles, words that are capitalized, numbers, headings, things that are italicized, long words, things that stand out, pictures, diagram. And then you're generating questions about those things. For example, why are they mentioning San Francisco? What happened in 1949? You're generating all kinds of cognitive biases as well to try and get your mind to be curious. The human brain can't resist a good question. And so if you are able to generate questions and curiosity and essentially get yourself to the point where you actually want to read this text, even if it's something you don't necessarily want to read, you're going to enhance your focus, which is going to enhance your comprehension. Studies have actually shown that people who pre-read the text not only are able to read faster when they do read it, they're also able to produce higher quality, more accurate summaries of the text, which is a proxy for how well they understood, retained, and were able to reproduce and recall the text. It's a very good test for understanding actually how much of it sank in. And all that is from flipping through the pages, spending 1 or 2 seconds on each page before you read.
Interesting. So in 1 or 2 seconds, I mean, you're not really vocalizing anything. You're just sort of like getting a visual exposure.
You're barely comprehending anything.
Yeah, it's like, those are words.
Yeah, you're literally generating curiosity. And the beauty of this technique is that there's kind of no wrong way to do it. I mean, we're in the process right now of building our certified coaching program and training our certified coaches. And so I've just gone through this whole thought process of a lot of what we do. The trick is like, I don't know what's going on in the person's head. And there's a lot of like false flags that can happen and cognitive biases and stuff like that. But with this one, the test is very simple. Is the reader able to produce questions around the text? Like if I have you skim, Pete, 15 pages, looking at each page for 1 second, and then I take the book away and I ask you, what are some of the things you want to know when you read this, when I let you read this? And you go, okay, I saw this thing in there. It was like hypermyalgia, something like that. I didn't catch what that word is, but I'm dying to know what it is and what it means. And why is it in a history textbook? Like that makes no sense to me. Or you come and you say, oh man, I saw the word vegan and I have a feeling I know what this author is going to say. And I have a feeling this is going to be that kind of text that my friend Alan really loves because he's like a total vegan warrior. So you're already generating questions, curiosity, and you go back to those 3 requirements that I mentioned. You've already done a lot of the work to prime your brain. And this comes from the theory of an early learning expert named Malcolm Knowles. You've already told me how you're going to use the text. You've already told me why it's applicable and why you're looking to read it. And in some instances, you've already told me that you're going to be using it immediately to talk to your friend Alan or send it and rub the article in his face. So you've generated so much curiosity and questions. The other test is like, are you now eager and excited to read this text? Because forget the fact that it's about real estate law in the Netherlands or something super boring like that. Are you eager to read it because you have all these unanswered questions?
Yeah. And then if you're not, that might be an indicator right there. It's like, well, do you have to read it? Maybe you can call that done and move on to something else.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, yeah, that gets me going. I'm thinking now about, Bob Cialdini in his book Persuasion. He sort of talks about how he figured out a formula to get his class like super engaged such that they would not even leave when the bell rang. He's like, oh, it looks like we've cracked the code here. And it was that very thing. It's about generating questions like, how is it that this occurred when this, and this were not working in their favor? They're like, well, I don't know. How did that occur? And so, it's just like any good story or movie or book, or even like a mediocre one, like Lifetime original movies. There was a period of my life, I don't know why, they kept sucking me in and they weren't very good.
This was before Netflix.
Right. Yeah. Cool. So SQ3R, you brought it to life way more than I've experienced when I first encountered it. That it's all about generating that curiosity and that eagerness so that your brain is amped, it's primed, it's good to go. So what should we do after the pre-reading?
Well, then you've gotten through the S and the Q. Now you get to R. You do your first read through, and ideally, you speed read depending on your level of training, I guess I would say. You speed read the text, and we can go into how all that works or doesn't work in the case of a lot of what you see online. And then after that, you pause and you review. You review the text. You close your eyes or close the book or look up at the ceiling, and you ask yourself, what did I take away from that? And you do this. You can do it at the end of every page. You can do it at the end of chapters, but you stop and you create visualizations, visual mnemonics. This is huge because most people read once and expect themselves to remember everything that they read in that book forever. And that's not going to happen. Even with the best mnemonic techniques, you're only going to remember it for so long. What you need to do is spaced repetition. So you close the book, you review, and then later on, ideally, you would test yourself on this knowledge. I like to create simple tests for myself by just writing a summary for myself of the book and key takeaways and key points. And then after that, you continue to review. Periodically, you go in, look at your notes, look at your highlights, and just kind of refresh yourself. Look at your book summary, because anyone who tells you I can teach you how to memorize something once and remember it forever is a liar. Your brain is designed to forget things. It is highly efficient, in fact, at forgetting the things that you don't use. So if you want to remember something, you kind of need to review it and use it.
Yeah. There was a brief period of time in which all of United States history made great sense, right when I took the AP US history exam in high school.
Right.
And it was kind of fun. And then it all left me, alas. So understood. So if you don't need it, it goes away. You got to do some reinforcing of it. Cool. Well, so that's sort of the speed reading side of things. Any perspective with regard to like eye stops? And I saw a video with Tim Ferriss drawing some lines in on a book. Anything you want to comment on in that world?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, you have to understand that your eyes are not meant to read. Right? And reading is great. I love reading. Me and reading are besties. But we are not really meant to process language visually. And therefore, reading does this kind of weird thing where you take visual information, which is these little squiggles on a page, which were super effective at consuming information in that way. We can not only assess someone's face and if we recognize them, but also the complex emotions on that person's face in 150 milliseconds. It's insane. We're really good at picking up information visually. But then what we do is we try to process language through that. That's where everything kind of falls apart because we don't process language that fast. And so we subvocalize, which is an unavoidable thing because we're meant to process language auditorily. And so you have this kind of like whole mess of what's going on. And that's why when you scan people's larynx, even speed readers, by the way.
As I do.
Yeah, as one does, you just put sophisticated electronic equipment up to one's larynx in your goings about. And you see that there's electrical signaling when someone is reading because we're kind of processing with our larynx. I'm not a neuroscientist and don't play one on the internet, but that's kind of what we've understood about reading. So there's no way to eliminate subvocalization entirely, but you can reduce it in the same way that we've all seen those stupid things posted where it's like every word is misspelled, but the first and last character is right, so you don't even notice, or you can still read it. Or situations where you see a paragraph of text and the word "the" is repeated every single time twice, but you don't even notice because you're kind of on an autopilot. So we can reduce subvocalization, and one of the ways that we do that is by optimizing the movement of the eyes. When your eyes are in motion, when they're making what's called saccades, you're actually subject to a phenomenon called saccadic blindness or saccadic masking. In other words, your optic nerve kind of shuts off while your eyes are in motion. If you don't believe me, you can put two fingers out in front of you, one on your right hand, one on your left, and then look at your left finger and then look at your right finger and notice that you kind of don't pick up any information in between. Your brain stitches the pictures together. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because we had a recording timer going. It's actually moving, right? You see those red numbers moving. They totally disappeared. Yeah. Okay. I'm with you.
So, and that's fine. That's like really useful if you don't want to fall over every time you like move your eyes. But what that means is while your eyes are in motion, you're not taking in additional information. Most people, when they read, they make one saccade and one fixation, which is kind of, think of a fixation as like an eyeful or a resting of the eye. It's when you're fixated on something per word. And therefore, there's a lot of motion going on and a lot of time spent in saccadic blindness. You can never train your eyes to have a wider fovea, which is the focal area of the eye, but you can train your brain to pay attention to the fuzzy stuff the same way that someone who needs glasses can still kind of pay attention to what's happening, even though it's a little fuzzy. You can do this with various different tools. And once you train your brain to pay attention to the fuzzy stuff in the parafovea, the stuff outside the focal optimal area, then you can start making larger saccades, moving your eyes only once or twice per line of text. And then we can optimize those even further. So you waste less time and less of the fovea and parafovea looking at white stuff in the margins and more time looking at the good stuff, the text.
And so when you say tools, is this like the writing of lines inside a couple words of the margins of a book, or what do you mean by tools?
Tools to expand your ability to take in information from the paraphobia are called Schultz tables. And you can actually check them out at games.becomeasuperlearner.com. We have some free Schultz table exercises that people can do. It's quite fun. It's like a Sudoku, but you stare at the middle square and then you try without moving your eyes to pick up all the stuff in the periphery. And then you expand it, get bigger, make the number smaller, and you can actually train yourself to pick up stuff in the margins, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is fun. And we're both genuinely enthusiastic about this. This is what makes a podcast great. It does sound like fun for me to do. And I definitely plan on doing so. So now then, you mentioned subvocalization, which is like the inner voice,
right?
Kind of saying the words. You're saying, so that still happens. Even though our eyeballs are taking in more words, we've got that tiny voice is actually reading silently all the words that we're picking up.
Yeah. Well, and not all. Even people who aren't trained in speed reading rarely subvocalize every word, like and, etc. But for a long time, I thought I just need to get better and reduce it to the point where it doesn't happen. And then I dug deeper into the research and realized a few different things. One, there's no way to eliminate subvocalization. It's just part of how we process the text, but you can minimize it. And also, every once in a while, and by that I mean like at least once a month, people like to send me a different research paper or article or study, quote unquote, disproving speed reading. And I love these because almost invariably they prove the kind of speed reading that we're teaching. They're disproving the speed reading of 5,000 words per minute by saying reading is limited in the most skilled and trained readers to 600 words per minute with perfect comprehension, or 800. And one of the things that they talk about is you cannot train your brain to read an entire page or even an entire line without, it just can't be done. You can't read an entire line without moving your eyes. But they've shown in studies that when you block the stuff in the periphery, in the paraphobia, so for example, if you track someone's eye on the line and you essentially only let them read the word that they're reading, and you don't let them have what they call the preview effect, their comprehension and reading speed dramatically suffers, even when the blocker is moving pretty much as fast as their eye. So it's super interesting. It's like this research that disproves speed reading is actually proving exactly this, that like the paraphobia is a critical part of reading and you need to be able to see what's happening. So therefore, we should be able to optimize and train that piece.
That's cool. Well, let's maybe shift gears for
I don't know if that answered your question, though.
Oh, no, I dig it in terms of, yep, that voice is going to be going and there's no way around it. But, you may not have to articulate every connector word in the inner voice. So that's handy.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why that's so important is, first off, our comprehension is just better visually. We have better visual memory and better, as I said, we're faster at comprehending things visually. But also, I encourage everyone listening to this podcast, go back a couple minutes, and if your app allows it, it probably doesn't allow you to go beyond 3x speed. And the reason for that is we can really only comprehend the spoken word at around 400 words per minute. And the reason most of these apps are limited to 2x speed is because you can't really get every single word at more than 300 to 400 words per minute. Now, I'm speaking about 150 to 160 words per minute. So, you do the math, 2x speed is 300, and see how comfortable that is. And then imagine another 50% on top of that. So this subvocalizing every word really just slows you down.
Okay, cool. So let's shift to the memory side of things. I've read some of the tricks associated with, if you try to memorize a list of things, create a ridiculous picture in your brain to connect them. So if I'm remembering iPhone and screwdriver, I might imagine like 100 screwdrivers dancing on my iPhone, and then I've connected those lists, and then numerically turn each number into like a sound, like 9 becomes a P or B sound, and then you can create words out of numbers and then visualize them and link them together. So those are some tactics that I found kind of handy when I really hunker down and say, okay, I have to remember this list. There's no means of writing this down. We're going to go use these approaches. But what I find tricky is faces. And I think all professionals could be enriched by this, is if we could put
Totally.
faces to names. So, Jonathan, I'd love to put you on the spot. How can we boost our memory for names and faces?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually, people often ask me, like, what do I use this stuff for, and where has it made the most impact in my life? And I think they expect me to be like, well, I speak 4 languages and I learned 2 musical instruments in the last few years and blah, 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 blah. But that hasn't impacted my life nearly as much as just always being able to remember names. And like one corollary of that is I can tell you all the waiters that have served me in the last like 2 weeks. Today, my waitress at the restaurant was Maya. And whenever I need Maya, like everyone else is shouting, excuse me, or check please. And I just say Maya at normal speaking volume and she whips around and I have my check and it's amazing. How do you do names and faces? Very simple. Same association and visualization techniques. In order to memorize something, first you need to visualize it. It's going to be the vast majority of the benefit is going to come from visualizing everything that you want to remember, creating these novel, bizarre pictures that you mentioned, but then also connecting it. Our brains function a lot like Google's PageRank algorithm. They ask, what is this connected to? How many other things is it connected to? And how important are those things? Because there's a lot of information hitting us every day, and we need some way to figure out what is and is not important. So what I might do is first connect that person to someone else that I know that has that name, and figure out their commonalities, picture the 2 of them together, picture the 2 of them fighting, something absurd, outrageous. That might be easy. If their name has another possible visualization opportunity, for example, Mike, I might picture them doing karaoke and embarrassing themselves with a microphone.
With a microphone.
Right. If their name is Ross, I might picture them bargain shopping at the store Ross, and on and on and on. If they have a name that you maybe don't know, like Sanjana or Krishant, I would break it down and figure out a way to make it into some kind of visualization that I am familiar with. So Krishant might become croissant, and I might visualize him wearing a hat made of a croissant. And I'm probably, hopefully, not going to call him croissant. But if I do, I can say that I misspoke. And that's how you do it. It's visualizations and connections to pre-existing knowledge. Now, I'm probably never going to forget what a croissant looks like or what a croissant is. That's a memory that's like pretty deeply ingrained for me, especially because I have many memories when I was living in France of walking down the street and picking up fresh croissants, and maybe I could throw croissant in with that memory. So you pick things that are familiar to you, that are important to you, and then you incorporate those into, again, tip number 1, your visualizations.
And so just how long does that mental process take?
Fractions of a second, if you're trained. Well, so Harry Lorraine once told me, this is going to seem like a tangent. He once told me the first thing to remembering names and faces is actually paying attention to them. So I do have to mention that because Harry Lorraine is kind of the godfather of modern memory improvement. And he's right. About this, we agree. Most people don't pay attention. So first step is pay attention. And second step is repeat the name back. Because I cannot tell you, these techniques are so incredibly powerful. You really don't want to misremember someone's name. I had someone who I thought I could have sworn she said Sharon. It was Shannon. I,
Gotcha.
For many weeks after that, called her Sharon. And I never once forgot, by the way, to call her Sharon. They're very powerful techniques. Make sure you get the name right. In that time where you go, is that Krishant? Am I saying that right? You now have given yourself 1 to 2 seconds, which is more than enough time. Recently, at the same lecture for Shell, someone came up to me after I got off stage and he said, okay, memory man, look at this. And his last name was C. His nickname was C plus 13 because his last name had 14 letters. C plus da-da-da. And it was pronounced Horachevsky.
Mm-hmm.
This like long Polish name.
Horachevsky.
And he's like, how do you remember that? And I was like, in the time it took me to describe it, I already had it, right? So I imagine people dancing the hora, like Orthodox Jews with the black and white outfit. They're dancing the hora in a Chevy, and they're like shaking skis above their head. Horachevsky. Like, how quick is that, right? All I did was just, what do those 3 things sound like? Hora, Shev, ski. Visualize that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Now, I always talk about Horachevsky. I don't remember his first name. He didn't ask me to memorize his first name. I believe it was Jeff.
Well, what's funny is that I can imagine that maybe the first 100 times you do this, you got to hunker down and think for a good, 20 seconds. Horachevsky. Okay, boy, let me go. I'm going to go with prostitute. I don't know. And
that works. That's even better than mine because it's more outrageous. Violent, sexual, and kind of like disturbed imagery works even better.
Okay, cool. Well, so you've got a turn of a phrase that I can't resist. Got to touch on this. What's the mnemonic nuclear option, and how do we use it?
Oh, yeah. This is a good one. So the mnemonic nuclear option is my kind of fun nickname for the memory palace.
Oh, okay. How was that? It just worked out perfectly.
Yeah, I call it the nuclear option because it's kind of like, for most things, going to a water balloon fight and bringing an ICBM with a nuclear warhead. It's like, it'll do the job. It's probably overkill, but it'll do the job. If you're learning 3 people's names at a cocktail party, you probably don't need a memory palace. It'll work. And what you do in the memory palace technique or method of loci people may have heard is you take a location such as your house, your office, whatever. You take these visualizations that you've created of Mike on the mic or Horachevsky, and you put them in places. That's it. You put them on furniture. You put them in window sills, corners. I like to put them in logical places based on what they are. So, for example, the word for burn in Russian is stored on the stove. Makes a lot of sense. And just by doing that, because our brains are wired to remember location, and it's kind of part of your survival toolkit. If you don't know where the winter food supply is or where you buried something or how to get to the watering hole, you're kind of done from an evolutionary perspective. So our brains remember locations really crazy well automatically. So this is just kind of hijacking that. And it's an incredibly powerful technique. This is how people reach those achievements of pi to 30,000 digits or a deck of cards in under 13 seconds. It's insanely powerful. I think it's out of all the hacks that I've ever learned, and I've done 240 something, 50 something episodes with some of the world's top superhumans. This one is the craziest one, where it's like, I can teach you this, and in an hour of practice, I can 10 to 20x your memory. Massive ROI.
Well, I guess we won't spend a whole hour on it, but I've heard of this. But so, like, if I just stick a person on the couch in my head, I don't know. That doesn't seem kind of very noteworthy to me. Like, do I need to make it ridiculous with regard to how they're being placed on the couch, or how do I make it?
Let me show you how powerful this is. We'll play a fun game. Did you move around a lot when you were a kid?
No.
And everyone in the audience can do this, even if they did. Do you remember your childhood home?
Yes.
You remember your parents' bedroom?
Yes.
That was probably the room that you spent the least time in the house, right?
That's true.
Okay. What side did mom sleep on, left or right?
I don't know if I know. I know where the little wolf puppet was that belonged to my dad.
Okay. Where was that?
On the bedpost. That was on the left side as I'm facing it. The left foot side.
Okay. Do you remember, was there a table by the side of the bed?
Yes.
What was on that table?
There was an old school alarm clock with red digital numbers and usually a book.
So 2 things. Was it a GE alarm clock, the red digital numbers?
I'm not sure.
So, funny story. I do this a lot to demonstrate. By the way, when was the last time you were in that house?
It was
roughly
more than 13 years ago.
More than 13. Did you ever sit down and go, I better remember this red alarm clock?
No.
Right. So your brain does this automatically, ranging from, you could tell me what corner of your shower the soap bottles are in, like the most mundane, stupid things, all the way up to 13 years ago, what was on the bedside table in the room that you spent the least time in. The other funny thing is I do this a lot as a demonstration, and it seems like everyone's parents had that same freaking alarm clock. My parents had the exact same one. It was like wood grain, red letters, GE. They must have made millions on those alarm clocks.
That's good. It's good. A product winner. So I'm with you. Fair enough. I'm remembering these locations real well. And so then I can just stick new things there and they'll be there when I revisit the location.
Yeah. And you do need to review. You can't do it once and it'll be there forever. Though some stuff that I've put in there once randomly, I can't get rid of. That's a whole different skill. But with very minimal review, it will stay in there.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about a couple of your favorite things. Jonathan, can you give us a favorite quote?
Ooh, I've got a few. But I'll go back to an old school one that I used to love, which is the greatest happiness in life is the conviction that we're loved for ourselves, or rather loved in spite of ourselves.
Powerful. And how about a favorite book?
I'd have to probably say Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
Yeah, so people can check out superhumanacademy.com, where we have hundreds and hundreds of hours of podcast episodes with the world's top performers, online courses, free trials of online courses. We got a ton of stuff up there. And I would encourage people to check out my latest book coming out September 3rd. It's on Amazon, and we can send a link to put in the show notes for you guys. And that is called The Only Skill That Matters. And it talks about all this stuff in a fun and engaging way with stories and examples. My mom says it's a really good read. So what more testimonial do you need?
That's good. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks seeking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah, I want people to go out today, and I want them in their job or in their day-to-day interactions to learn the names that, as we've discussed today. I want them to learn the names of 10 new people. And then I want them to remember those names, first off. And I want them to see what the impact in their life is of just getting to know 10 new people and learning their names, professionally, personally, or otherwise.
Thank you. Jonathan, this has been a lot of fun. I wish you all the best in your learning adventures.
Back at you. Thanks so much for having me.
You know, I'll tell you, it has been so helpful to apply Jonathan's memory approach for names. And I've also learned how it can just really be personal for you in terms of what your associations are. So there was this woman at church, and I know I have heard her name numerous times, but this time I've decided I was going to lock it in. So I applied the techniques, and I tried to get violent with it, actually. She said her name was Nancy, and that reminded me of an episode of the cartoon Archer, in which our hero Archer is trying to defuse a bomb. And there was a funny misunderstanding because he was entering this code and the person on the other end of the phone was spelling out the letters of the code. And so he says, M as in Nancy, and then it explodes. And he goes, what's going on? You know, this bomb exploded on me. It's a cartoon, so he's not dead. This bomb exploded. You said N as in Nancy. He's like, no, I said M as in Mancy. Ha, 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 ha. Why would you use the word Mancy to illustrate the letter M when Nancy is much more common? I understand there's a Mancy's in Ohio somewhere, which is a tasty restaurant. I look forward to checking it out. But anyway, so there's an explosion. And so I imagined Nancy exploding into pieces with her body parts and blood all over the place. Well, that's very dramatic and gruesome and disturbing. But as Jonathan said, it sure was effective. I have never forgotten her name. I know that's Nancy, and that is locked in forever. So if you're okay letting your brain go to these dark places for moments, you can reap the benefits for a long, long time. So again, the show notes, the transcript, the links to items we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/ep485. And if you haven't already, I hope you push subscribe. If you do so, you will catch our next guest, who is Dave Stachowiak. He is back for a second time. I know we got many Coaching for Leaders listeners amongst us, and we are going to hear Dave's masterful perspectives on investing in people. He is so good at it. So it's great to get his take. So I hope to catch you there. Peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.